when you're trading something, you're trying to find something that is going to have more value in a set period of time, right? So how do you crazy stocks? I think he's talking about like how we found like wheat and now fertilizer and stuff like that. Okay, this is why I trade the news. I don't do technical analysis. I use it for entries and exits, but I trade the news, right? And that's what the morning call like is, right? Like I tell you guys what I'm looking at in the news, right? And so there's millions of ways to trade, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. No one's going to be accurate all the time. If that was the case, then everybody be trading the same way. I want you to think about this real quick. Okay, so back in February, when Russia was when you got Ukraine, you got Russia, when they started like putting stuff on the border. No one knew if they were going to invade or not. Most people, I was even like, they're not going to invade. I was like, maybe they push a little bit in, but they're not going to like full on invade. But we started focusing on, okay, if there is a major conflict in this area, what's going to be affected from a global scale? Prices are already high, supply chains are already fucked. What is going to be affected? And that's when we started looking at what are the major exports of Ukraine, right? Like let's say they shut down Ukraine. What are the major exports? We saw that wheat was a major one for them, right? Wheat was a major one for them. And they supplied it to Europe. Then we started looking at other things too. But when we started looking at wheat, we started saying, okay, if Russia invades or there is tension and it stifles the wheat production or, supply chains of wheat, it's going to move up. So you kind of get in for that speculative move, right? And then what happens is you get what these called like run-ons, right? Like run-on wheat, run-on bread, run-on these things when the prices start going up. People want to get in ahead of it, which ends up driving up demand. Supply is dwindling as demand is still increasing. So instead of a natural increase, it's an exponential increase. Guys, wheat is the ETF. Wheat is the grain. Okay, this is the ETF. All right. So that's kind of what we looked at, right? Now, you start looking at other things, right? Remember when we played coffee last year and coffee ran because of the drought and the shortages in Brazil, right? You try to look at these things. It's not always going to stay the same. Anything can happen, can change. Now, fertilizer. You're like, Stocky, why fertilizer? Okay, why fertilizer? A few things to keep in mind, all right? And this is CF, MOS, and NTR. Why fertilizer? Well, Russia supplies a lot of the fertilizer of the world. And who are their biggest importers? Well, think about this. Does anybody know why India has been abstaining from the vote on condemning them? I can't prove it, but India is a major importer of fertilizer. Brazil is a major. Okay, just think of all the places that have massive crops. Okay, especially if you want to break it down, nitric, or however the fuck you spell nitric. And so, if food prices are already skyrocketing due to inflation, supply chain issues, then you've got a disruption in the global supply, especially in the European side of wheat. And if fertilizer, which is used in massive quantities to grow agriculture, is going up, that's going to drive the price of food up even more. So inflation isn't going anywhere. Rate cuts aren't going to do shit at this point. It's done. It's done. It's over. The rate cut changing anything is over. 25 basis points is like having a fucking a panic room in your house, but not putting a lock on it. And so now I'm looking at NTR number 1. We looked at this last week when it was like 87. It's almost 100 now. This is purely nitric, right? And then you've got MOS, you got CF. These are companies that are going to do it. I mean, look at it this way. Look at what we played with palladium, right? Something like 50 or 45% of the world's palladium comes out of Russia. And so if there's escalations and sanctions and it can only get worse, you kind of look for supply and demand. Catalytic converters are this, right? Are catalytic converters going to be forever? No. I mean, EVs are changing the landscape of how vehicles are being built and made. But right now, EVs are kind of halted with semiconductor, supply chain issues and inflation. And used cars are going crazy right now. And people are still buying vehicles because COVID restrictions are being dropped everywhere, including mask mandates and vax mandates. People are being required to go back to work, go back to school. So cars are going to be driving again. Fuel is ridiculously expensive. And so what does that mean? Either A, you're going to have to buy cars, and they're going to have to have production for catalytic converters, or nobody's driving because gas is too expensive, so their cars are sitting out doing nothing, and people come by and steal the catalytic converters. And you know what? Palladium is used for that. This isn't always going to work. I'm not sitting here like, look, we fucking knew these things were all going to go up. We don't. But this is what trying to trade commodities is like. Unlike stocks where it's based on, earnings and sector growth and money flowing into it and stuff like that. That's why trading stocks and commodities are totally different. Commodities you're trying to guess what the price of something's going to be in the future in a given time zone based on whatever reasoning. And now with oil being touching $130, $140 a barrel, historical precedent says we're headed for a recession. Now, does that mean we're going to? I don't fucking know, but historical precedent says that. Remember that video I did on stagflation, which scares me more than inflation or deflation? This is becoming more and more of a possibility every day. All right, tankers, guys. We talked about a couple this morning, as well as some of the fuel tankers and some of the other ones. And there's also shipping, guys. Shipping, tankers, okay? Oil tankers as well as commodity shipping, whatever. We've been playing shipping and container storage, the whole 9 yards for a while now for a lot of reasons. Supply chains, the whole, all that good stuff. What are the latest developments? Number one, Suez Canal. Ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is raising the price on your toll through the Suez Canal. F3, exactly. So, they are going to raise it as much as 10% to get through the Suez Canal. Suez Canal accounts for as much as 40% of the world's cargo. All right? That is a massive increase. Someone's got to eat that cost. Whether it's the companies or whether it's passed on to consumers or whether it's passed on to the people paying for storage. Number two, I learned this today. Did you know that 1 in 7 workers in the shipping industry are either Ukrainian or Russian? I didn't know that.
Do I think oil will continue to skyrocket? I think that it's going to come down to what happens with OPEC and this potential for OPEC to start flooding with more supply. I think oil takes a little bit of a break before we end up seeing another spike in oil. Once Russia is officially cut off, then it's going to be another scarcity issue, and then we're going to see Mideast oil go in. Which will probably push oil up, but I wouldn't be surprised to see oil dip under $100 a barrel again, with the idea that some of these other countries are going to pop in the short term and flood the market with some oil until OPEC meets again. It's like, hey, bitch, we were making too much money. Cut those hoses off again, and then we'll see a spike up again. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a dip under $100 a barrel and then back up again. That's just my personal take on it. And that's just me. I have no idea. Obviously, I'm guessing, but based on what I'm seeing right now, I could see a dip under 100 a barrel and then back up to 120, 130, 140. But obviously, stop stuff you could do. Okay.